The sun rose over the bustling city of Crestwood, casting a golden glow on its streets. Governor Marcus Allen, a tall man with a warm smile and an aura of quiet confidence, stepped out of his modest home. Despite his high office, Marcus preferred simplicity. He lived in a middle-class neighborhood rather than the governor's mansion, wanting to stay connected to the people he served. That morning, Marcus decided to take a walk through the park near his house. He loved these moments of solitude before the chaos of meetings and speeches consumed his day. Dressed casually in jeans and a light jacket, he strolled along the winding paths, nodding at neighbors who recognized him. Some greeted him warmly, others simply smiled, unaware they were crossing paths with their state's leader. As he walked, Marcus reflected on recent events. His administration had been working tirelessly to address systemic issues within law enforcement, including bias and misconduct. It was personal for him. Growing up, he'd faced prejudice himself, but he always believed in rising above it. Change starts from within, he often said during interviews. Yet today, as birds chirped cheerfully around him, those heavy thoughts seemed distant. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Officer Daniel Carter was patrolling the same area. A seasoned cop nearing retirement, Daniel prided himself on keeping the streets safe. But years of stress and exposure to crime had hardened him. Over time, stereotypes about certain groups had seeped into his mindset, clouding his judgment. To many residents, he came across as stern and unapproachable. Daniel's patrol car slowed as he noticed Marcus sitting on a bench by the lake. From afar, all Daniel saw was a black man wearing casual clothes, not someone you'd expect to find in this part of town. Suspicion flickered in his mind. What's he doing here? This isn't his neighborhood, Daniel thought, ignoring the fact that public parks belong to everyone. Marcus sensed movement nearby and glanced up. He spotted the police cruiser parked a few feet away. At first, he didn't think much of it. Officers frequently patrolled the area. However, when Daniel stepped out of the car, hand resting on his holster, Marcus felt uneasy. Something about the officer's demeanor set off alarm bells. "Good morning," Marcus said politely, standing up to acknowledge the officer. Instead of responding cordially, Daniel demanded, "What are you doing here?" Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "I'm just enjoying some fresh air. Is there a problem?" Ignoring the question, Daniel pressed further. "Do you live around here?" "Yes, actually," Marcus replied calmly, pointing toward his house visible from where they stood. "Right over there." But Daniel wasn't convinced. In his mind, something didn't add up. Why would someone like Marcus, a black man dressed so casually, reside in this predominantly white, affluent neighborhood? Bias whispered louder than reason, and Daniel made a decision that would soon spiral out of control. "Come with me," Daniel ordered abruptly, gesturing toward the patrol car. Marcus frowned, confusion giving way to frustration. "Excuse me? On what grounds?" "This is a routine check," Daniel snapped, though no such protocol existed. "Let's go." For a brief moment, Marcus considered revealing his identity. Surely, showing his ID or mentioning his title would resolve the situation quickly. But then he hesitated. If even the governor couldn't walk freely without being profiled, what hope did ordinary citizens have? With a deep breath, Marcus chose silence, deciding to see how far this misunderstanding would go. Little did either man know, their encounter was about to become far more consequential than either could imagine. The air inside the patrol car was thick with tension as Officer Daniel Carter drove Marcus Allen to the police station. Marcus sat quietly in the back seat, his hands folded neatly on his lap, observing everything around him. Though outwardly calm, his mind raced. He couldn't believe this was happening, not just to him, but potentially to countless others who didn't have the privilege of being heard. Daniel, meanwhile, gripped the steering wheel tightly. His jaw was clenched and his eyes darted between the road and the rearview mirror. Deep down, he felt a flicker of doubt about what he was doing, but years of ingrained habits and unchecked biases pushed those doubts aside. "This is for safety," he muttered under his breath, trying to convince himself more than anyone else. At the station, officers looked up curiously as Daniel escorted Marcus through the door. Some recognized the name Marcus Allen from news headlines, but none connected the dots between the casually dressed man before them and the governor they'd seen giving speeches on TV. To most, he just looked like another suspect brought in for questioning. Daniel led Marcus to a small, dimly lit room with a metal table and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the walls. "Wait here," Daniel instructed brusquely before stepping out and closing the door behind him. Alone in the room, Marcus took a deep breath. He could feel anger bubbling beneath the surface, but he forced himself to stay composed. This wasn't just about him. It was about exposing the flaws in a system that allowed situations like this to happen. Still, it was hard not to feel humiliated. How many times had innocent people been treated this way without the world ever knowing? Outside the interrogation room, Daniel hesitated. Something about Marcus's demeanor unsettled him. There was no defiance, no aggression, just quiet dignity. It made Daniel uneasy, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Frustrated, he decided to call Detective Laura Hayes for backup. Laura was known for her sharp instincts and fair approach, and Daniel hoped she might help clarify things. When Laura arrived, Daniel quickly briefed her. "I stopped him at the park because he seemed suspicious," Daniel explained defensively. "He lives in a neighborhood where he doesn't belong." Laura raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She had worked with Daniel long enough to know his tendencies. Instead, she asked, "Did you check his ID?" "No," Daniel admitted reluctantly. "He didn't offer it, and I didn't ask." Shaking her head slightly, Laura grabbed a clipboard and headed into the interrogation room. As she entered, her professional demeanor softened when she saw Marcus sitting patiently at the table. Something about his presence struck her. He carried himself with authority even in such an undignified setting. "Good morning, sir," Laura began, pulling out a chair across from him. "I'm Detective Hayes. Can we start by getting your identification?" Marcus nodded slowly, reaching into his pocket and producing his wallet. He slid his driver's license across the table. Laura picked it up, glanced at the name, and froze. Her eyes widened as realization dawned on her. Governor Marcus Allen. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Laura cleared her throat and stood up abruptly. "Excuse me, Governor," she said respectfully. "Please give me one moment." Confused but intrigued, Marcus watched as Laura exited the room. Outside, she confronted Daniel, holding up the license. "Do you realize who this is?" she demanded sharply. Daniel squinted at the card, then paled. "The governor?" he whispered, his voice trembling. All the confidence he'd displayed earlier evaporated instantly. "Yes, the governor," Laura confirmed sternly. "And now we have a very big problem." As Daniel processed the gravity of his mistake, panic set in. What had he done? How would this reflect on him and on the entire department? Meanwhile, back in the interrogation room, Marcus waited patiently, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Unbeknownst to everyone, this incident was about to spark a chain reaction that would challenge assumptions, ignite public discourse, and force both individuals and institutions to confront uncomfortable truths. Detective Laura Hayes stood frozen for a moment, gripping Governor Marcus Allen's driver's license tightly in her hand. She glanced at Daniel, whose face had turned ashen with dread. "We need to fix this now," she said firmly, lowering her voice so it wouldn't carry into the interrogation room. Daniel stammered, his usual bravado replaced by sheer panic. I didn't know. He wasn't acting like someone important. He was just sitting there." Laura shot him a sharp look. "That's not an excuse, Daniel. You profiled him based on nothing more than your assumptions." Her tone softened slightly but remained firm. "This isn't just about you anymore. This is about the department and how we handle this situation." Inside the room, Marcus sat quietly, watching the clock tick away. Though he hadn't heard their conversation, he could sense something had shifted. The tension outside was palpable, even through the closed door. For a brief moment he considered standing up and leaving to make a statement to reclaim his dignity, but he decided against it. If he walked out now, the lesson would be lost. People needed to see what happened when prejudice went unchecked. Moments later, Laura re-entered the room, her expression calm but apologetic. "Governor Allen," she began, choosing her words carefully, "I deeply apologize for the misunderstanding. Officer Carter didn't realize who you were when he brought you here." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her intently. His voice was steady but carried an edge of authority. "Detective Hayes, let me ask you something. Would I still be sitting here if I weren't the governor?" Laura hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Honestly, probably. And that's why this matters so much. It shouldn't take a title or status for someone to be treated fairly." Her honesty caught Marcus off guard, but he appreciated it. Too often people tried to cover their mistakes with excuses or deflection. Laura, however, seemed genuinely remorseful and willing to acknowledge the deeper issue at play. Before anything else could be said, the station erupted into chaos. Word of the governor's presence had spread quickly among the officers, and soon whispers filled the hallway. One rookie accidentally let slip the news to a reporter waiting outside for an unrelated story. Within minutes, social media lit up with speculation. Is the governor being detained? Why is he at the police station? By the time Chief Raymond Miller arrived, cameras were already rolling outside the building. A seasoned leader known for his no-nonsense approach, Chief Miller immediately took charge. He ushered Marcus into his private office, offering profuse apologies while trying to shield him from further scrutiny. "I can't tell you how sorry I am for this, Governor," Chief Miller said earnestly. "Officer Carter acted improperly, and I assure you appropriate action will be taken." Marcus listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When Chief Miller finished speaking, Marcus responded calmly. "Chief, I'm not here because I want revenge or punishment for one officer. I'm here because this incident highlights a systemic problem, one that affects thousands of people, every day. What are you going to do about that?" The question hung heavy in the air. Chief Miller opened his mouth to respond but found himself at a loss for words. He knew Marcus was right. The department had been grappling with issues of bias and accountability for years, but meaningful change always seemed just out of reach. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Carter sat slumped in the break room, staring blankly at the wall. Other officers avoided him, unsure of what to say. Some felt sympathy, others thought he deserved whatever consequences came his way. Daniel replayed the morning's events over and over in his mind, each replay making him feel smaller and more ashamed. Outside, reporters gathered like vultures, eager for answers. Phones buzzed nonstop as updates trickled in. Protest groups began organizing online, calling for justice and reform. Hashtags like "Fair Treatment for All" trended rapidly, drawing attention nationwide. Back in Chief Miller's office, Marcus made a decision. "I'll address the press," he announced suddenly. Everyone looked at him in surprise. "But only if I can speak honestly, not just about today, but about the bigger picture." Chief Miller hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "If that's what you want, Governor, we'll support you." As Marcus prepared to step outside and face the crowd, he felt a mix of emotions: anger, determination, and hope. This wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about using his platform to spark real change. Little did he know, his words were about to ignite a movement far greater than anyone anticipated. The crowd outside the police station grew restless as reporters jockeyed for position, microphones and cameras at the ready. Word had spread quickly about Governor Marcus Allen's unexpected visit to the station, and speculation ran rampant. Protesters held signs reading, "Justice for All" and "End Racial Profiling," their chants echoing through the streets. The air buzzed with anticipation. Everyone wanted answers. Inside, Chief Miller tried one last time to dissuade Marcus from addressing the press. "Governor, this could blow up in your face," he warned cautiously. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" Marcus nodded firmly. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about every person who's been treated unfairly because of how they look or where they come from. If I don't speak up now, when will anyone listen?" With that, Marcus stepped out into the bright sunlight, flanked by Chief Miller and Detective Laura Hayes. Cameras flashed and a sea of voices called out his name. For a moment the noise overwhelmed him, but Marcus raised a hand signaling for silence. Slowly the crowd quieted down, hanging on his every word. "Good afternoon," Marcus began, his voice steady and commanding. "I am here today not as a victim, but as a witness to an incident that happens far too often in our society. This morning I was detained under suspicion of, well, nothing more than existing in a place someone thought I didn't belong." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks while protesters nodded in agreement. Marcus paused, letting his words sink. Before continuing, "I'm fortunate I have a title, resources, and a platform, but what about the countless others who don't? What about the young man stopped late at night simply because of the color of his skin? Or the woman questioned in a store because she looks suspicious? These experiences aren't isolated incidents, they're symptoms of a much larger problem." He turned slightly, gesturing toward the police station behind him. "Law enforcement plays a critical role in keeping us safe, but trust is broken when people feel targeted instead of protected. Today, I challenge each of you, not just the officers here, but everyone watching, to reflect on your own biases. Change starts within ourselves." His words struck a chord. Some officers shifted uncomfortably while others exchanged glances, realizing the weight of his message. Among them, Officer Daniel Carter stood near the back of the group, avoiding eye contact. Guilt weighed heavily on him, but Marcus's speech wasn't accusatory. It was a call to action. "If we want true justice," Marcus continued, "we must work together. That means holding ourselves accountable and demanding better from our institutions. To Chief Miller and the department, I offer my support, but also my expectation that meaningful reforms will follow." As he concluded, the crowd erupted into applause. Protesters cheered, holding their signs higher, while reporters shouted questions. Marcus answered a few briefly before stepping back inside, leaving the public to process what they'd heard. Back in the station, emotions ran high. Chief Miller immediately called an emergency meeting with senior staff, vowing to implement implicit bias training and improve community relations. Meanwhile, Detective Laura Hayes approached Marcus privately. "Thank you for handling this with grace," she said sincerely. "Not everyone would have done the same." Marcus smiled faintly. "It's easy to point fingers, harder to build bridges. Let's hope this is the start of something better." But not everyone shared the sentiment. In the locker room, Daniel sat alone, staring at his badge. Doubts swirled in his mind. Could he continue wearing it after what he'd done? Was he even fit to serve? Unbeknownst to all, Marcus's speech had already gone viral. Social media platforms lit up with discussions about racial profiling, systemic inequality, and the need for reform. Influencers, activists, and everyday citizens joined the conversation, amplifying his message across the country. What started as a single act of prejudice was now a catalyst for change. But the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. And for Marcus, the hardest battles were yet to come. The days following Marcus Allen's speech were a whirlwind of activity. News outlets replayed his words endlessly, dissecting every sentence and praising his calm yet passionate delivery. Social media buzzed with hashtags like "Listen to Marcus" and "Reform Now," sparking conversations in households, workplaces, and government offices across the nation. For many, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that systemic issues couldn't be ignored any longer. At the state capitol, Marcus returned to work amidst a flurry of attention. Colleagues greeted him with pats on the back, some offering genuine admiration while others seemed more concerned about optics. "You've really shaken things up," one senator remarked cautiously. Marcus simply nodded, knowing full well that shaking things up was exactly what he intended to do. Behind closed doors, Marcus convened an emergency meeting with key members of his administration. "We have momentum right now," he told them firmly. "People are listening. Let's use this moment to push for real change." Ideas flowed freely: mandatory bias training for law enforcement, increased funding for community outreach programs, and independent oversight boards to investigate misconduct. Marcus listened intently, jotting notes and refining proposals. but not everyone supported his efforts. Opponents argued that such reforms would undermine police authority or create unnecessary bureaucracy. Some even accused Marcus of exploiting his own experience for political gain. Letters criticizing his actions poured into his office, though they were vastly outnumbered by messages of gratitude from citizens who finally felt seen. Meanwhile, the police department grappled with its own reckoning. Chief Miller wasted no time implementing changes, starting with mandatory seminars on implicit bias. Officers filed into conference rooms reluctantly, some rolling their eyes while others crossed their arms defensively. Detective Laura Hayes led several sessions, sharing stories of her own experiences and urging colleagues to confront uncomfortable truths. "This isn't about blame," she emphasized during one session. "It's about growth. If we want communities to trust us, we need to earn that trust." Officer Daniel Carter attended these meetings quietly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Each presentation hit close to home, forcing him to confront behaviors he'd long justified as just doing his job. At night, he lay awake, haunted by guilt. He considered resigning but feared the stigma that would follow. Instead, he decided to seek counseling, hoping to understand why he'd acted so rashly and how he could do better moving forward. Public reaction remained mixed. While many applauded Marcus's leadership, others pushed back against the proposed reforms. Protesters gathered outside the Capitol building holding opposing signs. Some demanded justice and accountability. Others defended traditional policing methods. Tensions ran high, and Marcus knew he had to tread carefully. One evening, as Marcus prepared for another round of meetings, his phone buzzed with an unexpected call. It was Reverend James Thompson, a respected civil rights leader known for bridging divides between communities and law enforcement. "Governor Allen," the Reverend began warmly, "I wanted to commend you for your courage, but I also want to help. We can't let this moment pass without action." Grateful for the offer, Marcus accepted eagerly. Together, they planned a series of town halls where citizens could voice their concerns directly to officials and officers. These events weren't easy. Emotions often ran high, but they fostered dialogue and understanding. Slowly, walls began to crumble. Still, Marcus faced personal challenges. Critics questioned whether his policies went too far, while allies urged him to go further. Balancing differing perspectives tested his resolve, but he reminded himself daily of the bigger picture. Change wasn't linear. It was messy, painful, and slow. Yet each small victory brought hope. As weeks turned into months, Marcus noticed subtle shifts. More officers approached him privately, thanking him for shining a light on difficult issues. Community members expressed renewed faith in local leaders, and though resistance lingered, progress felt tangible. But just as optimism began to take root, a new challenge emerged, one that would test Marcus's leadership like never before. Just as Governor Marcus Allen began to see glimmers of progress, a shocking event threatened to derail everything. Late one evening, a video surfaced online showing Officer Daniel Carter being ambushed outside his home. The footage, grainy but unmistakable, showed a masked individual confronting Daniel in his driveway. Words were exchanged, though muffled, by poor audio quality, and then the assailant pulled out a weapon. Before Daniel could react, he was struck violently and left bleeding on the ground. The attack sent shockwaves through the community. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, speculating about motives. Some claimed it was retaliation for Daniel's earlier actions against Marcus, while others suggested it might be unrelated. Regardless, fear spread quickly among law enforcement, officers and civilians alike. Marcus received an urgent call from Chief Miller early the next morning. "Governor, we need your help," the chief said, his voice strained with worry. "This incident has everyone on edge. If tensions escalate further, I'm afraid things could spiral out of control." Marcus understood the gravity of the situation. While Daniel's earlier behavior had been wrong, violence was never the answer. He immediately called a press conference to address the public. Standing at the podium, his expression was somber, yet resolute. "Last night, an officer was attacked. In what appears to be a targeted act of aggression," Marcus began. Let me be clear. No matter how strongly you feel about injustice, violence only perpetuates more harm. We cannot fight hate with hate. My administration stands firmly against any form of retribution or vigilantism. His words resonated with many, but not all. Critics accused him of showing leniency toward someone who didn't deserve it, while supporters praised his commitment to nonviolence. Online debates raged, exposing deep divides within the community. Meanwhile, Daniel lay recovering in the hospital, guarded around the clock by fellow officers. Though physically bruised, the emotional toll weighed heavier. Friends visited sporadically, but most avoided discussing the attack, unsure of what to say. One day, Detective Laura Hayes stopped by, her presence offering quiet comfort. "You don't deserve this," she told him gently. "No one does. But maybe this is a chance to rebuild. Not just yourself, but trust with others." Daniel nodded slowly, tears welling up in his eyes. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly reflect on the pain he'd caused, not just Marcus, but countless others over the years. He realized that healing wasn't just about forgiving himself, it was about making amends. Back at the Capitol, Marcus worked tirelessly to prevent further unrest. With Reverend Thompson's guidance, he organized a vigil for peace, inviting both law enforcement and community members to attend. Hundreds gathered in the park where Marcus had been detained months earlier, candles flickering softly in the cool night air. "This park became a symbol of division," Marcus said during the vigil. "But tonight let it become a symbol of unity. Let us honor those affected by prejudice and violence, not with anger, but with compassion. Together we can build bridges instead of walls." As the crowd listened, some wiped away tears while others clasped hands with strangers. It was a powerful moment, filled with raw emotion and fragile hope. Yet beneath the surface, challenges remained. Anonymous threats circulated online, targeting both Marcus and outspoken reform advocates. Tensions simmered, ready to boil over at the slightest provocation. And behind closed doors, whispers of resistance grew louder among those unwilling to embrace change. Marcus knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles. But standing there under the stars, surrounded by people yearning for justice, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Change was possible, but only if they stayed united. Little did he know, one final test awaited, a decision that would define his legacy forever. The weeks following the vigil were tense, but Governor Marcus Allen refused to let fear dictate his actions. Anonymous threats continued to trickle in, some directed at him personally, others targeting police officers and reform advocates alike. Despite the danger, Marcus remained steadfast in his mission. He knew that retreating now would only undo the progress they'd made. One morning, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at his office, Officer Daniel Carter. Still recovering from the attack, Daniel looked smaller somehow, his usual bravado replaced by humility. Laura Hayes had accompanied him, offering quiet support as he stepped inside. "Governor," Daniel began hesitantly, his voice trembling, I came here to apologize. Not just for what happened to you, but for everything. For all the times I let my biases cloud my judgment. For all the people I hurt, without even realizing it." Marcus studied Daniel carefully, seeing not just the man who had wronged him, but someone trying to change. After a long pause, he nodded. "Apologies are important, Officer Carter, but actions speak louder than words. What will you do differently, moving forward?" Daniel swallowed hard, meeting Marcus's gaze. "I've started volunteering with youth programs in underserved neighborhoods. I want to show kids that not all cops are bad, and maybe prove to myself that I can be better." Marcus smiled faintly, impressed by Daniel's willingness to step outside his comfort zone. "That's a good start. Keep going." Word of Daniel's efforts spread quickly, sparking mixed reactions. Some praised his courage to confront his mistakes publicly, while others dismissed it as too little, too late. But Marcus saw it as proof that redemption was possible, even for those who seemed irredeemable. Meanwhile, Marcus pushed ahead with sweeping reforms. With Reverend Thompson's help, he brokered agreements between community leaders and law enforcement agencies, creating joint task forces to address systemic issues. Independent oversight boards were established, ensuring accountability for misconduct. Training programs focused on empathy and cultural awareness became mandatory across departments. These changes weren't easy. They faced resistance at every turn. Critics argued that reforms undermined authority, while supporters urged Marcus to push harder. Through it all, Marcus stayed grounded, reminding himself daily why this fight mattered. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of negotiations, Marcus found solace in the park where his journey had begun. As he walked along the familiar paths, he reflected on how much had changed and how much work still lay ahead. The road to true justice was long, but each step brought them closer. A young boy playing nearby caught his attention. When their eyes met, the child grinned and waved enthusiastically. Marcus waved back, struck by the innocence and hope in the gesture. It reminded him of why he'd entered public service in the first place, to create a world where everyone could feel safe and valued. Months later, Marcus stood before a packed auditorium to deliver a keynote speech commemorating the anniversary of the reforms. Officers, activists, and citizens filled the seats, united by shared struggles and triumphs. As Marcus spoke, his voice carried both pride and determination. "We've come far," he said, scanning the crowd, "but our work is far from over. Change isn't something we achieve overnight. It's something we nurture every single day. Let us continue to listen, learn, and grow together." The audience erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. Among them was Daniel Carter, now working closely with community outreach programs. He clapped alongside everyone else, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. As Marcus left the stage, he paused briefly to look out at the sea of faces. In that moment, he realized his legacy wouldn't be defined by titles or speeches, but by the lives touched and transformed through collective effort. And so, under the golden glow of progress, Marcus Allen walked forward, carrying the hopes of a brighter future with every step.